Shalom, shalom. This is Rabbi Moshe, TORAH, Ways of Israel. I wanted to talk with you regarding the topic of demons. Do demons exist? I sent a little TikTok video asking, do you believe in demons? Do you believe they exist? Well, in the common term, and I'm going to use a lot of sources based upon the Jewish perception and how we see this in today's world, but in most of the world that we understand, a demon is an evil spirit or a devil. In ordinary English language, the usage of this term demon, this is a definition, is however only an approximate, not exact. We're going to take a look at the Hebrew, the biblical, and other areas of whether demons exist or they don't. In polytheistic religions, the line between good and demons is a shifting one. There are both good demons and gods who do evil. In the monotheistic system, evil spirits may be accepted as servants of the one God, so that the demonology is bound up with angelology and theology proper, or they may be elevated to the rank of opponents of God, in which cases their status as diabolical powers different from that of demons in polytheism. In the same way, in none of the languages of the ancient Near East, including Hebrew, is there anyone in general terms equivalent to the English quote-unquote demon. In general, the notion of a demon in the ancient Near East was of a being less powerful than a god and less endowed with individuality. Whereas the great gods are accorded regular public worship, and demons are not. They are dealt with in magical or magic rites in individual cases of human suffering, which is their sphere, their particular sphere. Now, most of this information I'm giving you, I got it from virtual Jewish library. Demonology is in the ancient Near East. Defense against evil spirits was a big concern in the Mesopotamia from earliest times, beginning with the Sumerians, to whom much of the terminology and practice connected with demons may be traced. There is no qualitative difference between great gods and demons. One name for one demon is an evil god. Demons, however, have less power, though occasionally myth depicts them as rebelling against the great gods, with some success. Incantation often lists 4 or even 7 classes of great gods. Now, demons are messengers of the Lord of the underworld and march before him. They live in deserts and near graves, and many of them are ghosts, spirits of the dead, especially of those who died by violence and were not properly buried. Sickness may be thought of as caused by demonic possessions, and some demons have the name of specific diseases. They bring headaches or fever, or lamashtu is the hag who kills children in the womb and the newborn babies, like other many demons. She is depicted as the opposite as a composite monster. Lilitu, the Mesopotamian succubus, is mentioned once in the Bible as a Lilith. As we know, the Hebrew word Lilith means darkness, Laila, Lilith, in Isaiah 34:14 and following. In the latter Jewish demonology, good demons are mentioned much less frequently. In general feature, the Canaanite demonology probably resembled that of Mesopotamia, to judge from the rather meager evidence preserved in the mythological text of the Ugarit, the father of the gods. El is frightened almost to death by a demon, having 2 horns and a tail, like the devil in the latter representation. A Phoenician amulet of the 7th century before the Common Era, from Arslan to Dash, begins the incantations. O flying one, O goddess, O Sasam, O God, O strangler of lambs. The house I enter, you shall not enter. The court I tread, you must not tread. Intended to protect a woman in childbirth. As you're going to see, there is a lot of superstition and incantation involved in this, which is mainly for the psyche of the person. It goes on to invoke the protection of the gods and contain depictions of demons mentioned, and winged phoenix labeled flying ones, Lilith, and wolf devouring a child. As a matter of fact, many of our horror pictures like werewolves and vampires and all that is derived from this whole entire genre of, you might call it superstitious or even esoteric materials. And thus you have details where winged sphinx are flying, and you have texts of iconography have close parallel in Mesopotamian, Arabic, and classical and latter Jewish folklore, which illustrates the well-nigh universal character of many of the superstitions about demons. And this you'll find sources on this on Gaster and Orientalia in 1942. Now, demonology in the Bible, Israel's official religion, contrasts sharply with the contemporary polytheism in the role assigned to demons. So it's completely different in the Jewish thought, biblical thought, than that of what is known in general light, which in Bible is practical nil. Magic was prohibited among the Israelites from the very early time. For already the oldest collection of the laws of the Book of the Covenant contains the commandment, and you shall not tolerate a sorceress. Exodus chapter 22, verse 17. And also, in the English version, you'll find it in Exodus 22, verse 18, and Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10 through 12. And Saul put the practitioner of necromancy out of the land. 1 Samuel chapter 28, verse 3. And since much of the pagan magic was protective and dead to keep demons away or to expel them, obviously Israel's religion, Israel's faith, aimed at a very radical extirpation of the traffic with demons. Calamities and illness were not from demons, but rather from the Lord. Shall there be evil in a city and the Lord has not done it? Amos chapter 3, verse 6. Although God does not always accomplish his will immediately, he uses messengers or angels and spirits as agents. It's ordinarily made explicit that the spirits are under his control, and thus God is king. The evil spirit which troubles Saul is an evil spirit from the Lord, called a Ruach Ra, 1 Samuel 16, verse 14, and therefore one must not overestimate the importance of numerous small traces of belief in demons which survive in the Bible, and underestimate the difficulties involved in interpreting them. Most of the passages in questions are poetic, and it is often impossible to be certain whether the demon name is part of a living religious belief or only part of a traditional literary language. Just as in Mesopotamia, demons have names which are also common nouns, so in biblical cases like Dever or Mavet, which means death, it's hard to be sure when these are proper names or when they are not. The Israelite conception of demons as it existed in popular mind or literary imagination resembled in some way the ways that it was held elsewhere. Demons live in the desert or in ruins. We'll see that in Leviticus chapter 16, verse 10, in Isaiah chapter 13, verse 21, and Isaiah 34, 14. They inflict sickness on men, Psalms 91, verse 5 through 6. They trouble men's mind. Now this is very important because we can see that a lot of the issues of unclean spirit has to do with the mental station of the person. And believe it or not, in our society today, we have a lot of mentally ill people that can even be called evil spirits. 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 15 and 23, and they would deceive them. 1 Kings chapter 22, verse 22 through 23. But nevertheless, these evil spirits are sent by the Lord. Literally, nothing is under and impossible for the God of Israel. Thus, God controls everything, and everything is under him. The mysterious being who attacks Jacob in Genesis 32, verse 25 and following, exhibits a trait which is very widespread belief associated with demons, who are spirits of the night and must perish at dawn. Even in the Israelite popular religion, however, there seems to have been relatively little fear of the spirits of the dead. The Bible often mentions the shades of the dead, but the congregation of the shades, Proverbs 21, verse 16. And it carries on shadowy existence below. And it does not seem to trouble the living. Some features of Israelites' cult bear a formal resemblance to a apotropic measure employed in other religions. Thus, the bell of the robe of the high priest in Exodus chapter 28, verse 33 through 35, recall the use of bells in other cultures and believe that their tinkling keeps off demons. So also the horns, the shofar. Exodus chapter 19, verse 16, Leviticus chapter 25, verse 9, and the following. Incense, Leviticus chapter 16, verse 12 through 13, and the smearing on the doorpost. Exodus 12, verse 7, in the color blue, Numbers chapter 15, verse 38, and written scriptural text on the phylacteries, on the tefillins, and that we'll find in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 8, and chapter 11, verse 18. All of these have parallels elsewhere as devices to ward off evil spirit, or ruchim ra. In a given case, however, it's often extremely difficult to say to what extent any of these devices were conscientiously used for the protection of demons as a particular period. Now we're going to go specifically what it means, demons. Foreign gods are called shadim, and that you'll find in Deuteronomy 32, verse 17, Psalms 106, verse 37, and even in the Christian Bible you'll read that also in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 20. And it's rendered as Akkadian or Sadu, demons or good and evil. Sirim, or hairy demon, satires, is applied also contemptuously to foreign deities, as you'll find in Leviticus chapter 17, verse 7, 2 Chronicles chapter 11, verse 15, and these creatures haunt ruins, along with Lilith, the spirit of the night, the spirit of seduction. We're going to go into that a little bit with Lilith, because there's an interesting connection between issues of immodesty and Lilith, because it was used, supposedly this being was the one that seduced Adam Harishon. But we'll look at that later on in Isaiah chapter 13, verse 21, and chapter 34, verse 14. Lilith, in Isaiah 34, verse 13, ultimately it's from the Sumerian Lil, air, not the Hebrew Lila, for night. It was originally a succubus believed to cohabit with mortals, but in the Arslan Tash incantation quoted above, she is identified with a child-stealing demon, a character she retains till this day in folklore. The tradition is that the name means screeching owl, and so in many other translations reflects the ancient association of birds, especially owls, with demonic presence. Mavet, the ordinary Hebrew word for death, is also the proper name of a Canaanite underworld god. Mot, the enemy of Baal in a Ugaritic epic. The proper name of the common noun should probably be understood. In Isaiah 28, verse 15 and 18, we have made a covenant with Mot, with death. And in Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 20, English, Isaiah 9:21, for death is come up into our windows, or dot means the spirit of death comes up to our window. We'll see this also referred to the angel of the firstborn, death, in Hosea chapter 13, verse 14, and Job chapter 18, verse 13, and Exodus chapter 28, verse 22. And thus we have another one named Reshep, which is another major god of the Canaanite religion, who becomes a demonic figure in biblical literature, as Reshep is known as the god of plague over much of the ancient Near East in the text and artistic representation, spanning more than a millennium from 1850 before the Common Era all the way to 350 before the Common Era. In Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 5, we read, "The Lord is on the warpath and is said to be preceded and followed by respectively Deber and Reshphet." These are two pictures of two divine attendants who escorts major divinities or gods in ancient myth, just as some other names of deities are used in common nouns in the biblical Hebrew as Dagon, which means grain, and Ashtaroth, which means the increase of the flock, and Resheph, which means it has come to meaning play, as we read in Deuteronomy 33, verse 29, Psalm 78, verse 48, and the fiery darts of the bow in Psalms 76, verse 4, which is the English version of Psalms 76, 3, and Songs of Solomon, chapter 8, verse 6, apparently from the common association of plagues and arrows. Interesting enough that one of the demons were also called Dever, as we read in Pesach, the pestilence. These are part of the different messengers, as it were, from the divine. It is also a demonic herald who marches with the Lord to battle, Habakkuk 3:5. Dever is also mentioned in Psalms 91, verse 5 through 6, and thou shalt not be afraid of the terror, Pashad, by night, nor the arrow, Hez, that flies by day, nor the pestilence, Dever, that walketh in the darkness, nor for the destruction, Keteb, the waste at noontime. Nor, not only Dever was only, other words has plausibility identified as names of demons, but the word arrow is a familiar symbol in folklore for the disease or sudden pain. Ketev in Deuteronomy 32 verse 24, in Isaiah 28 verse 2, and Hosea chapter 13 verse 14 is an instance of this personification of overpowering noonday heat, known in the Greek and the Roman demonology. The famous one that we will take a look at is Azazel. Azazel occurs in the ritual Day of Atonement. It is named in Leviticus chapter 16, verse 8, chapter 10, verse 10 and 26. Aaron the priest would cast lots over the 2 goats, and one for Azazel is presented alive before the Lord and then released into the wilderness. The ancient Greek and Latin version is understood as Azazel as the goat that departs, hence a scapegoat of some English versions. Most of the rabbinic commentators and some of the moderns take Azazel as the name of the place with which the goat is driven. The great majority of the modern regards Azazel as a personal name of a demon thought to live in the wilderness. Even the idea of the vampire may be mentioned in Proverbs chapter 30, verse 15. Yes, vampire, the bloodsucker, as it were. The Aluka has 2 daughters crying, give, give. In Hebrew, Aluka simply means a leech. In other words, something that would suck out the blood. Since Aluka occurs in Arabic literature as a name of a vampire, this fabulous creature and her 2 daughters may be referred to in a very difficult passage in the demon intertestamental literature, including the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we will see later on. I'm going to stop here, but because this series is in a series, this is the first part of many parts regarding does demon exist, and if they do, what can we do? How do we protect ourselves? All of that will be included in this series of do demons exist. So share this video and let other people know that we're on top of issues that are of great concern to the world, including this thing of, is demons right now alive and affecting our world? We'll get to that, but stay tuned.